Welcome to session 8, the last workshop session of this conference. And the title of it is Funding Your Homeschool Organization. My name is Cam Liedall, and I'm your moderator for this session. We have 3 panelists, 2 that are right here. Ray Sheen is a veteran home education leader and a business leader. He has served in many leadership positions on many boards. He is also the governor of the Homeschool Community Foundation, in which solicits funds for organizations. He's been a business management consultant for 30 years, working in industry, government, and nonprofit organizations in strategy development and technology deployment. Juliet here is an experienced home educator. She is a very vocal advocate and passionate advocate as home education. She has been running groups, activities, conferences for numbers of years. She's the director at Streams Education, a nonprofit company in the UK offering support and advice to home educators, and she runs the Learn Free Home Educators Conference in the UK. So this session is covering, as you can tell by the topic, funding your homeschool organization. There will be, most of the topics here will be concentrated on revenue sources, how to obtain them, and what do you do when you don't have any to obtain. I would like to also introduce our third panelist, Sofia Gallis. She is a homeschool mom. She has been working in the world of education for many years. Since 2015, she has worked with Clonlara School to make personalized education available for more families. She is the president of the Board of Trustees of Clonlara and the executive director of Clonlara School. She holds an MBA from the Power Business School and is certified as an educator in global citizenship education. And now we will start with Ray.
Thank you, Kim. So what I want to do is give you some ideas on how to fund your organization, some of the ways of doing that. Okay, clicker not working right now. Oh, there we are. Okay. There are 10 different ways you can fund your organizations that I've seen funding homeschool organizations. In fact, I've used all 10 of these over the years with different organizations. Your organization, use whichever subset of these work for you. You probably aren't going to use all 10, but some of these will work for you, and again, pick and choose between those. And obviously, some of these methods can be combined or work well together, very complementary. Let me go through each of these and give you some of the pros and cons on each of these. First one, membership. This is typically an annual membership fee. People pay a certain amount to be a member of the organization. The advantages of this: it'll build your revenue, it gives you predictable revenue, builds your organization, builds loyalty, all that's great. The downside is that members often expect then that there are benefits from being a member. They may feel like, well, as members, we get to vote on who the officers are. You've heard in some of the other panels, we've talked about having a self-perpetuating board. That means the members don't get to choose the officers. The board chooses those. That's been a source of a conflict in several organizations that were member organizations that I know of. Members, so they expect to have some level of control or get some kind of benefit for that. So you need to make sure you've thought through what are the benefits of membership. Otherwise, why would someone want to join? Next method, subscriptions. Subscriptions are a long time ago, back when I first started in the homeschooling leadership, we were putting out paper newsletters. It was before the internet. And so the subscription there was newsletters, news magazines. Some organizations are still doing those. Many of organizations now have subscriptions to certain access to certain information behind a firewall. And so a subscription gives people access to that information, to webinars or podcasts or some other type of information. Pros of that is it creates an informed set of viewers or followers. That's a great thing. You're really building the knowledge, the commitment of your followers, of the people who are with you in the organization, builds the organization. The downside is you have to keep providing something that they're subscribing to. So you've got to be putting out content on a regular basis. Now, in some organizations that's very easy, not hard to do. Some of you may find that very difficult to do. So in that case, I would say that would not be a good option for you. But as long as you're able to handle the publishing, again, there's maybe some cost to publishing. If you're doing paper, there's definitely cost to publishing. If you're doing podcasts, there may be some annual fees associated with the podcasting platform you're working on. Third one, events. And this is where you charge for attendance to events. Conferences, retreats, those are the type of events we typically think of. And again, this can be a very large moneymaker. If you have a fairly large conference, you bring in some big name speakers, you can often charge quite a bit for that. Events, depending upon what the event is. There's some events now that are combining some entertainment, music, a band, or whatever, or a retreat where we get the whole family or just members of the family can go off for the weekend, spending time together, hearing some workshops, but having that special time. You can, again, you can often charge quite a bit for that. Make a lot of money with those. It can be a very big money maker. It builds credibility for your organization. People say, oh, they're the folks who put on that event. They're the folks who are the experts. So it really increases your name recognition significantly. The downside is there's a lot of work to plan an event. There's a lot of work putting on a conference like this. There's a lot of work. And often if you have an upfront cost for the venue, for wherever you're doing it, whether it's a convention center, some other kind of a hotel conference center, a retreat center, whatever it is, you typically have to put money down up front to reserve it. So that's the downside. You can make a lot of money. In pre-pandemic in the US, most of the state organizations made most of their money off of running an annual conference. And that one annual conference would essentially fund the organization for the rest of the year. Of course, with pandemics, all the conferences stopped, and so they had to rethink and look at other ways of generating revenue. Products. This is where you're charging for the delivery of some type of actual physical product. Product could be books, curriculum, some type of teaching aids. Your organization may be providing something to help people learn, or in some cases even swag. T-shirts, coffee cups, book bags, whatever it might be. But you charge for that, and then of course, obviously, that's can become a nice ongoing, continuing revenue stream, a one-time setup fee, and then it just happens from that point on. So it does provide assistance to homeschool parents, so that part is good. You're building the capability or capacity of the homeschooling organization. Difficulty there is you have to create the product initially, and then typically you have to inventory that product. So you're going to have to do the design work, the creation work, and then the production of the product to have the books sitting on the shelf so you can send them out or whatever it is that you're using. But once again, a good way of having a nice continuous flow if you have something that's of interest to that homeschooling community. So now a physical product, products are a physical item. You can also sell services. Services are when you're essentially providing your expertise, typically to homeschooling families. You're doing some type of counseling, some type of a service, and it may be directly counseling, curriculum counseling, or counseling on how to go through high school, how to create a transcript, how to get into college. It could be any of those. It could be for like the Pestalozzi Trust in South Africa. It is a legal defense counseling, a service that you're providing in case they run into problems with any kind of a legal issue being called into court. So seminars and workshops are also ways of doing a service that you're providing. Now they're services to parents so they can learn how better to, how do I teach when I have more than 3 kids in the house? whatever those seminars or workshops might be. Pros on this, it helps to build the knowledge of the parents, helps to build the organization. All that is great, again, building loyalty. But once again, this does take work. You're essentially selling hours of effort, hours of time. So there is work associated with this, work to create the service, and then work, ongoing expenses of delivering that service on whatever kind of a basis that you deliver it on. Okay, the next one, advertising. This is where you're charging to display some organization's advertisement in your materials, on your website, in your newsletter, on your one of your podcasts or whatever, a mail list. You may have a blast that you do, some kind of an email blast, and you put it on there. So you're putting information about those other organizations in your platforms. So the nice thing about this is you can, in many cases, get a predictable revenue. You have a monthly advertiser, and so you can get some predictability there. That can be very helpful, very useful for you when you're trying to just figure out how to keep the business going and keep the organization going. And there's very little additional work on your part. They create their ad, they send you their ad. All you do is just cut and paste it into whatever service you're providing, and then it goes out. That all sounds great. The difficulty here is there is work typically to find the advertisers, to get that set up, to close the deal with the advertisers, to explain to them why they would want to advertise with your community, with your mailing list. So you have to do selling of the ads. And then occasionally you can have problems if there's a problem at that advertiser and you've been advertising them, that will reflect onto your organization. Why were you advertising them when they did that? So occasionally you can get tainted with some kind of a problem based upon what that organization whose advertisements you're running, what that organization has done. Related to advertising, but not quite the same, is sponsorships. Sponsorships are where you're, again, getting somebody to give money to your organization, in this case, often for a particular event or a particular service or a particular something. They get the recognition, they get that, but now it's typically targeted on a particular event. So like, for instance, this conference, we have a number of sponsors. And you've been seeing those on flashing up on the PowerPoint slides, and those sponsors provided money to GHEX to help host this event, and for that they get the recognition, get access to all of the people who are here at the conference. So we receive the money, and again, it's a great way of particularly helping to fund an event, to get that upfront money that you might need for an event. But the disadvantage is, just like with advertising, you have to go out and recruit them, and there's often some strings attached to that sponsorship that you're going to have to deal with. Again, also the sponsors' problems can reflect onto your organization. Next one, donations, just straight donations, asking for money. Depending upon the laws in your country, donations might be tax deductible. And so that could be a reason that people would want to donate. Maybe they just want to donate because they believe in the cause. Having the ability to get donations is a great way to fund. And in some organizations, that has been their primary source of funding. Some organizations, virtually none. But the advantage is here, you have unrestricted use of those funds. When those donations come in, you normally can use it for whatever you want, unlike, for instance, sponsorships. You have to use it for the event. And you can also even accept very small amounts. You don't have to go out and get a donation of 10,000, pick your currency. You can get 10, and even those will begin to add up. So donations, great where that's concerned. Downside on it is, at least in the States, we have to maintain very close, very clear records of who's donated, because again, in the US, those donations provide a tax deduction, and so people need to have that paperwork so that they can use that to be able to get their tax deduction on their annual taxes. So there can be some paperwork, administrative work associated with managing the donations. Grants. Grants are awards that are provided by some other organization, an NGO, a corporate grant, a government grant. The grants are a block of money, often provided for a particular purpose. Now, not necessarily an event. This might be now, how can you extend your products and services into additional languages? How do you expand the scope of your organization? So it can be very large amounts of cash, but grant writing is a skill. It requires somebody who knows how to write the grant, can write the grant to get it approved. So this is going to take some work. There's often a very long cycle time from when you submit all your paperwork for the grant. It might be 6 months until you find out whether you were awarded a grant or not. There can be, in some cases, some restrictions on how you use it. Often you do have to do some follow-up paperwork showing how you've used it, what the grant was for, or what the grant helped you with. Self-funding. This is the last one, and this means the way you pay for it is you write a check from your own checkbook. And quite frankly, every organization that I've helped start, with the exception of one in the homeschooling community, every organization that I've helped start, it was initially being self-funded by our family. And so first few months, until we could get up and running, until we could start collecting memberships or subscriptions or have an event or collect donations, we were funding it. And that's often what we're going to be doing, self-funding. Of course, unrestricted use of the funds, on that, there's not a lot of bureaucracy. When we had to have a decision made, it was my wife and I sitting at the table saying, well, what do you think? Can we do this or not? And so that part was easy. The downside is it's not sustainable. You usually can't completely fund your organization just on your own, at least not long term, because it does decrease your personal wealth over time. So which is the best approach? Well, there's no right or wrong answer here. Use whichever approach fits your organization. What's your mission? What's your purpose? You've heard that being talked about in virtually every session. Mission, vision, purpose. What are we trying to do? What is the strategy we're using to achieve those? And based on that strategy, which of these approaches best fits what you're trying to do? You'll probably have a mix, and that mix may change from year to year as your strategies change, as you are reworking within the organization, within the community, changing your strategic position. You may find that you should be changing the way you raise money. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ray. You gave us some good ideas. Sofia? Okay. I'm just going to sit right here.
No, it's okay.
Well,
I can use the microphone.
no, it's fine. Please don't mind.
Sorry for my delay. I was so into the presentation that was going on in the other room that I forgot I had to come here to do a presentation. I was just like absorbed by what was going on. Apologies. So thank you so much, Ray, for making this wonderful starting, because I mean, this will be more about the same. There's not many offers beside what you already mentioned, so I will try to tackle down some of those with specific examples on a small or large scale. Where is the... Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. The elephant in the room. Depending where you're coming from, talking about money, it's not easy. In some places, it's a taboo. And if this is addressed to people from all over the country, it is an elephant in the room many times. And I think it's important to talk about that, especially in the nonprofit environment world, which is big and does a lot for all of us. If there was no nonprofit organizations, I don't know where the world would be right now. So, trying to be specific about the things, we always need to ensure adequate and balanced resources to manage those resources effectively, no matter what's the size of the organization. I always try to compare an organization with a family, right? We also need to balance our management, how we do it at home or not. Sometimes more effective, others not. It's always about planning. So there's the one side, the internal sources that Ray also mentioned, like services, financial planning, and budgeting, and the importance of that. Even in education around the world, we know that financial literacy is something that is not taught in schools. And I think homeschoolers do a great job helping kids and teenagers to understand that. And I think we as adults, we were not taught to think about money in that way, to bring sustainability to our own lives. So the services might feel something that people are not comfortable when you want to provide something for free, because we're trying to help the world, we're trying to help changing reality, so you really don't want to charge. But the reality is that you shouldn't be afraid to charge for your time. You're giving your heart, your dedication. That's the reality. In the membership that Ray mentioned, what I think it's important is that you give clear expectations, that you share very clear what is included or not in the paid membership, because often I've seen that organizations start like, you pay whatever and we will support you. What does support means? Once you notice, after 1 year, they want you to help their entire life, whatever is the topic. And I'm not saying this is a joke. It really happens. And because most of us are mission-driven, in the end, we are actually helping because we want to help people. We just don't see that we are crossing the boundaries of what was service of the membership was, especially if all of this is run by volunteers. As an organization, you might charging a membership fee, but that doesn't mean you are paying someone that is delivering the service, because they are volunteers. And people who are volunteer, they normally give much more than it's required. So keep this in mind to set the boundaries and what is not there. When it comes to events as another internal source, it can be complicated. Look to this amazing conference where we are, and it's a huge project that takes a long time to put together, but doesn't have to be always this big. It can start with a meeting in the park, where you try to bring families together because the weather is good if you are lucky to live in if you are outside of England most of the year, sorry. And you can go to the library, to a museum, and if you are there to provide something, sometimes a small fee, even if it's £5, brings commitment that we are here to support you, and are you going to show up? I put all of these, it's like a birthday party and no one shows up. It feels bad. So if you're making and struggling to put things together to help homeschoolers, charging sometimes a small fee, it's not the end of the world. Do not be afraid of asking for that. But also, if you don't want to do it at front because you don't feel comfortable about it, it's also okay to say, like, once you attend, if you think this was a good value of your time, can you please support what just happened, because there were costs for us all to be here. And then also the merchandising. Yes, it is a cost if you need to produce pens and cups, etc. But it can also start by your team producing something, some bracelets or something that you can do with simple resources. I'm just trying to break it down, to simple things that sometimes to start feels like, oh my God, this is a huge thing. How am I going to do it? There are little things that you can do to make it happen. Also, if you need to create an event, and again, I know realities in countries are very different. Maybe there are some places in the community that are free. If you rent a book in a university or in a library or as a school, even if you're a homeschooler, maybe it doesn't have to be a high cost. Nowadays, most of the conferences are in hotels or places like this, and those can be very, very costly. So keep those ideas in mind. Be creative and be bold, like, oh, no one does this. Well, just try it. The worst thing you can get is a no, we can't help you. So that's important. And then, again, the planning, the financial planning and budgeting. Be very clear about what you want to do, what's the purpose, how much do you need to raise, how does it cost to all, we have 10 volunteers here. Once a year, what's the cost? We still have the website, and we are traveling, and we are doing all the little things that you need to do, just list them, because in the end of the year, that's money coming out of your pockets, and it's time that you're taking from your personal life and family, etc. So having very, very clear goals, it's good. Another thing you can think is to do something that can be scalable. Nowadays, it's very easy, not that I love it, but with social media, you might create an online session, and then you just record it, and then you provide that you can repeat. The same product was done once and you can replicate it. I repeated the same information, how to homeschool. I lost count how many families I repeated exactly the same speech. And I've done that because as a mission-driven person, I want to explain, I want to hear their questions, and I want to address to their specific needs. But in the end, you realize I'm always saying the same thing. So breaking it down into a very clear, easy PDF, or presentation or online video, before you spend your time of your volunteers' time on explanations, just tell them, go and watch that. And then if you still have more questions, come back to me. So make your life easier. More and more people, I call it, I don't know if this makes sense in English, I call it, we are in a jelly generation. We want everything done in 5 minutes. In Portuguese, it makes sense because jelly is a very quick thing to do. And it's always ready in half an hour. So people are used to just get things endly, and we need to remind them that this is also part of the work, that they do their homework, they do their research and get informed. And then we have the external sources. Here is just an example of online fundraising auction Clara did last year. And the external sources are the most, I would say, are difficult, but sometimes are the ones who bring more revenue. So breaking down to particular things, I don't know where you are coming from, but there's always government funds, and you might think, no one wants to fund homeschooling. Again, challenge the rules. Be creative. Education is one of the pillars of society, so there's more and more actions and grants and things being created to bring innovation to education, to change education and the systems. So when you look to those grants, it's like, oh, this is not for me. Really read. I know it takes time, etc., but if you are willing to check all the details, and maybe your idea can be included in that fund, and maybe it will be a surprise for that committee to read your proposal. Oh, we never thought about this. So be creative when identifying the funds you might get. If you are an European funds are huge and are building and supporting European to be developed every single day. We just finished the 2020 funds, the 2030 funds are coming already. In many countries, they already shared. So it's the same. Education is a pressing social challenge. It has a huge impact on society. Homeschooling community is growing and growing, and we are part of that society. We are not outsiders. So everything you're doing is to support this society where you're living in. So be strong, be faithful for your mission, and do not try to impose your agenda because they will not get. Learn how to talk their language, understand their concepts, understand their concerns and needs, and show that you can also support those. And I'm not saying this is easy, okay? I'm just trying to encourage you, do not give up doing this. But that's a possibility. Education, again, is one of the pillars for most of those funds, or along with work condition, healthy poverty, and other societal needs. And as a curiosity this morning, I was just checking, what about the UK? And I just found an outreach fund from the Royal Society of Chemistry that says that they're providing financial support to members, individuals, and organizations to enable them to run chemistry-based engagement activities. And you might ask, well, how is this related to homeschooling? And I'd say, well, if you have a group of students who want to implement something regarding chemistry, or if they want to study and go ahead, they say it's for members, individuals, organizations. Again, it's just an example about being creative and brave when you are looking to what's out there and how you can fit into it. Of course, I didn't read this in detail. I just picked this one as an example that is something very specific. It's a chemistry. It might be sports, that we have students doing some sport work. Then we have the individual donors. And these ones, I think we need to be very careful. Because there is a very strong cultural acceptance of fundraising in the United States, and this is not the case in many other cultures and countries. In some countries, this is not even a concept, or it feels like rude or out of, it's something you don't do. So you need to check for sure what works in your country. Still, you can go to events, you can meet people, you can try to identify who are the people that could be interested in what you're doing. And then see if you think those people should be the ones, you can approach them and try to see if they qualify for what you consider as a donor. And then the third step is that you're really going to ask to solicitation, to ask for the money for the action you need. But then after that, you just don't get the money and you go away. You need to stewardship. You need to cultivate the relation, to pay attention, to understand how can they be supportive, and that you really appreciate their support. Individual donors sometimes can be adults that that who homeschool before and it worked for them, and maybe nowadays they are in a good position in their life. So talk to them and identify, like, we want to help more families who are doing the same. Yeah, and again, cultivating is the key. Get to know your donor and how they can best relate to your organization. So do not ever go and just ask, like, hi, I'm this organization, I need money, can you help me? There's a process that you need to work and plan to do this the best way possible. And always define a very specific need. So do not say, my organization needs financial support. Maybe, again, going down to a practical thing, maybe a group of homeschoolers are going to a country level contest and it costs X just to go there, and maybe your company or we can put a logo on your t-shirt or something, and you're already getting some money out of that. Then you have the sponsors. I know my time is getting short. Then you have the sponsors. And again, the sponsors are a key player rollers in big event structures. And identify sponsors might take some time, but you also need to identify those that make sense to connect with. But sometimes there's a type of sponsors that do not need this level of understanding. So in-kind donations, for example. When I was in high school and university back in Portugal, the student council, we always created some events, and something that we knew we always need to spend money was in water bottles. In Portugal, you don't have the jar, you always need to buy water. So we would go to all the water companies and ask, like, we only need 100 bottles. And for them, that's really nothing. And we would go there and collect the pallets and bring the waters with us, because that was not it was a low investment on them. It was not really affecting their company business. We would all be drinking their brand and maybe would be buying more. I'm requested to stop here. So the fundraising campaigns like online auctions, and again, nowadays, social media, it's a great resource to help you to move forward and spread, even partner with a homeschooler influencer or someone that that might can help. I need to go. Don't forget to ask for help, okay? You make a living by what you get, but you make a life by what you give. And volunteers are key players at nonprofit world. Please do respect their passion and dedication. Do not transform volunteers into unpaid work on a long-term basis. That's not sustainable. I know that doesn't sound good to say this, but if this is a lecture on leadership team, I have to say it. And their commitment and availability might bring a huge turnover. People are changing all the time if there's no commitment. So creating guidelines and clear expectations. And again, having a clear vision and mission statement is the foundation for making important financial decisions. Thank you so much, and good luck.
Thank you, Sofia. When I was the leader of a small support group, well, it turned into a large support group, we had an idea. We had a day-long science experience for elementary children. The cost of it to us, someone else came in and did it, was $30 a student, but we charged $40 per student and additional, and gave a discount to additional children, but we made that way at least $10 per student. For that, and that raised us, at the end of the day, we ended up with $500, and that was that day a lot of money for our support group. So you can get really creative. If you have an event, it doesn't have to be a big event with speakers. It may be a hands-on event with your children. And now we will hear from Juliet.
Hi, I feel like maybe I don't need to speak anymore, because there will be some repetition. So I live here in the UK. I have since 2007. And I found things quite different here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the UK scenario. Okay, so for one thing, in the UK, people are very independent-minded, and home educators even more so. So you come to them and you say, well, I've got this organization I'm going to set up so we can represent home educators. Oh, hold on a minute. You can't represent me. You don't speak for me. And there's a lot of mistrust. And I'm not quite sure where that comes from historically, but often I'm very thankful for that attitude from British people, because that's kind of what makes the government a little bit scared of us. So we're talking here this is a domain where it's a non-profit domain, but those who receive the support and services are often not really able to contribute. They're often single income families, so it's quite difficult actually. Okay, so another problem we have here is fragmentation. So we don't have a central organization. The one organization that is very well known in this country is Education Otherwise, and I think if it has 1/100th of I think that's what I worked out, because we've got about 100,000 home educators in the UK. If they have a membership of 1,000, I think it's around there at the moment. So they do charge a membership fee that they provide services for, but they are by no means driving Rolls Royces around, which is often what I think people fear in this country, is that we're going to buy ourselves a Rolls Royce for all our time and trouble that we've given. And what's really difficult in this country is the fact that we're giving a lot of time. And the fragmentation also means that people are not talking to each other, so there's competition between the different groups. By contrast, South Africa had more sort of centralized provincial groups that people got behind and were happy to support. Also, information and support is freely available. We have huge Facebook groups where people can go and get advice and support. So why would they pay for that? And it's difficult to coordinate. As I said, we've got these different organizations, and often there's a bit of ego comes into it. They don't want to talk to each other, and will sometimes badmouth each other. It's not a pretty sight. I do see Michelle laughing back there because she knows exactly what I'm talking about. And, in the UK, people are not fans of giving their money away to an organization, particularly where there's a lot of government stuff supplied by the government. So if people are able to receive benefits and housing benefits, that kind of thing, they almost expect that you're going to provide a service free of charge. One of the problems here, so these are some of the problems, the challenges. Our organizations are small. There's a core group of committed volunteers. Membership is low, and we're constrained by lack of finances. So there's a lot of things we would love to do, and some of us, quite frankly, could use a salary for all the time giving, because if we were to step out of that domain to actually help our family financially, there would be a great loss to the home educating community of that wisdom and experience. But getting people to realize that is another story. Sorry, it's sounding very doom and gloom here. Our organizations tend to be entirely volunteer-led, with people expecting you to sell your blood, literally, to make sure you provide them with a service. We do things like respond to inquiries, we share resources, we connect to support, and it's often, at least, I don't want to say 24/7, we do sleep, but, every other hour we're giving to people, responding to queries on Facebook, and setting up things, trying to organize things and help people. And we also use our own resources. So Ray spoke about self-funding. We give of our time, we give of our fuel driving around, we give of our devices using our phone contracts or needing laptops, whatever we need to provide that service. Or running websites, the cost of running websites. And even coming to a conference like this, our organizations in this country cannot finance somebody attending a conference and pay for them to do that. So that's quite difficult. So I'm trying not to stay too much in this domain, but I just want to give you a few examples of some of the issues. One of our long-standing home educators in this country who is very involved with education, otherwise she is disabled. And she really needed a wheelchair that could help her do what she needed to do, get around. And somebody else decided to set up a GoFundMe to help her get a wheelchair. And you would not believe the amount of negativity others would spread about how she's just using this for her own gain and that kind of thing. So that's what we're dealing with here. It's really difficult. We find things like advertising don't work as a rule because we don't have the big enough numbers to motivate people to advertise with us. I'm just I've made some notes here just when Ray was talking. Okay, so there's also no government funding. And as Sofia said earlier, there is funding sometimes with private things for specific projects, but then you're very constrained by that. Okay. We do find, however, that sometimes you can get some funding through some of the things that Sofia and Ray have shared, and it's generally linked to a service offered. So I'm going to share some things that have worked for me in the work that I do. So I have Streams, the website with some colleagues, and we do things like we have the website, we do a newsletter, we do a monthly blog, we run webinars, that kind of thing. At the moment, most of that is free because our intention is hopefully to build up trust, because credibility is everything in this business. Okay, so some people value your time if you're giving one-on-one support and are willing to pay for that. So an example, we've set up like a marketplace on our website where different home educators who have experience can offer to mentoring or coaching, and they can set their own rates and that kind of thing. So some people respond to that, but you're still not putting a lot of food on the table, if any. Okay, running events and activities within the community, as Ray said. So I ran a home educating group for many years, and we did charge enough to cover the costs of our hall, to cover the costs of materials. We would run also workshops, all sorts of things. And normally we were able to build up some money in the kitty that we could sometimes do something special or give back to the people that were making use of the group. And then I run a conference every year, which I am able to self-fund. And sometimes there's enough profit that I can keep it in the bank account for next year's conference, or I can fund things like travel. So I can cover some of my expenses that way. But it's also by no means, it's probably, if there's any profit at all, it's certainly not more than a couple of weeks' pay. But that is something you can do, and conferences, if they're well run, can be fantastic. But you do have to remember you've got to pay your speakers or cover their travel costs. There are all these expenses. Virtual conferences actually work really well, but people are very zoomed out now. They're not so keen anymore. Okay, so another thing that some organizations have been successful with is by offering help with challenges, for instance, dealing with a local authority. So I'm going to give the example of Education Otherwise, which is a charity. And if you're a member, they will help you they will assist you with writing your report for the local authority, give you some advice on it. They don't write it for you. If you're not a member, then you pay for that. But then again, we have a couple of groups who will do that free. So, why would you then pay that? And then, of course, as Ray said, providing resources is another way that you can raise funds. And you've got to be clever about that and try and find out where there's something that's not available readily elsewhere. What we do find with fundraising is we have had success with somebody, perhaps a family, facing a legal challenge, and they've done a GoFundMe, and we have raised something like £40,000 within a couple of days for that event. But You have to be transparent. People need to know exactly what's going on. They want to know where the money's going. If you don't use all of it, what are you doing with what's left over? So this is not a way to fund an organization, really. If you try and raise funds through a GoFundMe for your group or your organization, you have to be very clear what it's used for, because people are quite suspicious and don't just trust what you say, and your credibility is everything. And that's sounding terribly depressing, isn't it? Another thing that I've done, I just want to mention, is that we've done some webinars, and we found we were doing free webinars, and then people would just not, they'd register, not come. So we did start charging like a nominal fee to ensure they came, and that was enough to pay our website bill, like for the 1 month when we had to pay for our website. You know, so there are things like that you can do which can generate income to help you keep going. I'm also going to be running a Home Educators Fair in September, which will be for home educators to come to sell their used resources, and children can have a table to sell their wares, and we can run workshops. But I will be charging for that because I will have to pay for the venue, and hopefully I'm hoping that will generate a little bit of income to cover some of the outgoings that we have. You generally have to have charitable or non-profit status to raise money. Otherwise, you know, anyone, if you're seen as being an individual who's raising money, they are just very suspicious of you here. But it is possible. It is possible. And you have to demonstrate that there's a need, and transparency, very important. And I do find that as a group, you're way more successful than as an individual. People want to see that there's a group behind it. Now, I wanted to finish by talking a little bit about one fundraising initiative we currently have going, which is the Joy Baker Fund. So this Joy Baker Fund was set up as a charity just in the last year or so. And we're looking at how we can help families who could face financial hardship if they are taken to court, and where that legal challenge could have implications for the entire home educating community. So we've set that up as a charity and hoping to fundraise for that so that we can assist people with issues. But when you've got a big home educating population, if you can get people even just to commit to paying £1 a month, if you've got 50,000 people paying £1 a month, and if you can get that, you're going to be fine. But it's for us, the difficulty is really just motivating, winning over the trust. And for that, you have to have your credibility, and you have to have very clear goals that people recognize and can see the need and can get behind. So I'm sorry to leave you on that somewhat depressing note. But anyway, I'm sure we're going to take some questions now, Cam. I'll go and sit
Yes,
up
thank
there.
you. Thank you very much. So do we have any questions here from the audience? Any questions? No?
They've given up now.
Right?
Right, so this is for Juliet. Do you think, because obviously it's dire here trying to get anything raised, do you think it's become worse since COVID? Because I know certainly with not the ed-free stuff, with the groups where I run, we're not even getting the community rates at the same rate as we got pre-COVID. So we found rooms that we got for £20 an hour and now £50 an hour with less service available. Do you think it's got worse in the UK, or is it just because I live in London?
I do think it has, and also people are, we're in a cost of living crisis in this country, and people are reluctant to get out, it seems, since COVID. It's much harder. It's almost like people just like, I don't have to now, I liked being at home, and so that's been a lot harder. I found like the conference numbers have dropped substantially. So yes, I do think, and of course these organizations are also where the community halls and everything, they're trying to meet their budgets, that kind of thing. So, it compounds. So, I do think so. Have you found that? Ray?
Since the pandemic, the supply chain across the world has had problems, and that's rippled through. Commodity pricing on almost everything is up by anywhere from 50 to 100%. And that impacts every organization, including organizations like ours, for anything that we want to purchase, any kind of goods or services. So we see inflation in materials, inflation in any kind of services. And I don't think they're picking on homeschoolers. I think that's a reality of the huge supply chain disruptions that have happened worldwide and are still happening because of some of the wars.
So I just wanted to mention something which I forgot to mention, is that one thing that has worked a little bit in my favor is getting sponsorship. So the conference that I run I've been running since 2012, so it's got a bit of a track record, and I've got a good relationship with certain suppliers. And they've been really good about just helping me out a little bit with covering some of the costs. And I didn't mention that, Ray, you both mentioned sponsorship, but you can go to, if you've got something really worthwhile that you're offering, you can go and ask. But even that ran out a bit post-COVID, where, they were a little bit like, oh, not sure we can help you this year. So I don't know if you found the same, Sofia.
No, yeah, I just realized there was something on my notes I haven't said, which is related to that, which is the in-kind donations. Sometimes, there's a friend, it's an accountant, and a friend that has art expertise. So these little things, it's money you are saving as an organization. If someone can give in-kind services from their expertise, and maybe it's some business in the local community, maybe the neighbor's business, it's a printer, and you talk with them, I have this organization. It doesn't have to be huge sponsorships, because, maybe they know you for so long and they just live next door. It's fine if we are printing, T-shirts or something. I think in Europe we notice, with the war situation, not just the COVID, inflation in all services. I think everyone, business-wise, everyone is afraid of the future, and certain types of recessions or some certain things might come. So I think this option of giving away, it's lower. At the same time, I might say that there's a rise, at least in Europe, on what we call the social business, innovation social business, business. And in some countries, including UK, that there's a legal structure for that. In other countries, you either are a non-profit or not. So there's more and more, I would call it awareness, if that makes sense in English, of certain big companies and organizations. I would use companies if we can to really focus on the business side. There are more and more focus on how can I give back to the community? That's what I call the impact, social impact. And I don't want to bring brand names. So imagine big companies, and they start to be aware that I want to be a leader and to be conscious that I need to bring back to the society, to the world. So there's a lot of companies who have their own foundations, their own funds to give back, kind of to maybe release the guilt of whatever, something else they are bringing in, impacting the world. So that's a landscape that I've been paying attention. And I think it's good to look at, European-wise, at least, because those people are coming with more conscious that there's something they can do. And they are not, this awareness is bringing that there are more owners not just looking for profit, but part of my profit can go back to the community. It's just that the homeschooling community is such a small niche that identifying that they can relate to our story, it's good. And one way for them to relate to our story, it's all the research our colleagues and friends here are doing, because you can show that these homeschoolers can change the world in the future. And all the skills and competences that these kids and teenagers are developing to become entrepreneurs, and they are self-confident, they have good critical thinking, they are creative kids, much more than those in the educational systems, that they will impact the world in a positive way. They will impact the companies where they will be working. We see that in our reality at Colnar, that our students, the outcomes, where they go, what they do, they are recognized. And people say, wow, you're homeschooled, you're doing this, you're traveling around the world, It might take time for that recognition to come, but it's already happening. At a small scale, it's already happening. So bring visibility to that these brains, these minds of homeschoolers can transform their companies, their communities, it's a way also to show that we are bringing a real social innovation impact to the society.
Yeah, I've just thought about a positive thing that probably I think could work, is that if we had the children doing the fundraising. So the children raising to support organizations, because I think they're far more likely, especially with home education, if people see that it's the children that are initiating that and pushing and asking, they find it much harder to say no. I don't think they've got quite so much patience with parents, or they think the parents are keeping whatever prejudice they've got, But the other thing is also, I feel in some ways post-COVID, is that we almost have to get the mindset of starting from the beginning again, rebuilding those relationships, almost, not expecting to have what we had right before, but to kind of go back and then just build that again gradually.
Is there any other question? Comment? Okay, well, this will conclude our session, and we thank you for attending, and thank you, panelists, for participating.